Steve, back in the saddle. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, fella. What about you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. What do you want to talk about now?
Well, mate, I was thinking that from one of our previous conversations, we touched on the subject of redundancy. I think that you had been made redundant about gazillion times. And I had just found myself in that position. And so I thought to myself, I wonder if we should explore that. I'm really interested in what it does to someone being made redundant. What do you think?
First of all, since it's just fresh in your mind, what was your initial reactions?
What was my initial reaction? I have got to sort of be honest about this and say, I chose redundancy
Right.
rather than take a demotion. That's basically what was on the table. So I would either be demoted from the role that I had performed for the last sort of 4.5 years, or I would have to take redundancy. So it wasn't thrust upon me. I could have stayed working, but it would have just been at a different level. It would have been looking after only one fraction of the team that I used to run. It was my choice. I chose it rather than the alternative. But I'm not sure that that actually makes it any less of a kick in the balls just because you've chosen it, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. It's interesting. I actually hadn't thought about that. Is that when I put together some ideas about redundancy for myself, I have to go back to the 1990s. And one of them was me choosing to take redundancy. The others weren't. And it is a different kind of feeling because in a way you have agency. You've decided. It's better than being told out of the blue that you're being made redundant and you had no idea. That's different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right to bring that up. You made the decision, but still a difficult one.
It certainly was a difficult one for me because it sort of culminated in 4 decades of service, which were wrapped up in a way that I was perhaps not anticipating my service would be wrapped up. And it leaves you wondering, well, what the hell do I do next with life? Too young to retire, too old in my thinking and in my inclination to want to retrain at anything.
35 in spirit.
35 in spirit, yeah, that's right. I just don't know how interested I am in looking to pursue other things in great detail. Don't know what drive or energy I have for that, to be honest. So yeah, it's interesting, and it just leaves you thinking, well, what do you do next? Where do you go? How is that going to work? How does that look? And I found that coupled with the events of the last couple of years as well, which has been quite sort of discombobulating, and all of the things that have been going on around the world, that you chuck this on top of all of that melting pot, and I'm in my headspace, I'm just struggling to work out what trouser leg of time I'm now down. Everything's just a little bit out of kilter.
I'm glad you said trouser leg and not pipe. It could have been a sewer pipe, but I know what you mean.
Exactly.
I have to go back more than 2 decades when I first experienced it. What I will say now, I probably wouldn't have said if you interviewed me at the time. Time has moved on, personal study, I suppose experience, and the fading of time has enabled me to look at it a bit more objectively than if you'd have asked me in a couple of years just after the events. Because I think at that time I probably would have been carrying a bit of resentment, even a bit of anger, which actually doesn't serve. I now know that. In between, I've been to university, which helped me, I think, process things a bit more objectively. And secondly, 20-odd years of teaching, which towards the end I was teaching young enterprise and business studies. So I kind of approach it slightly different now than I was a younger man.
Just listening to what you're saying there about resentment and anger, and I think that's quite an interesting dynamic and range of emotions that you can go through when these sorts of things get thrown at you. So how do you actually deal with that resentment? How do you deal with that anger? How can you best channel that emotion, that energy, into something which is actually going to add some value to your life, rather than allow your thinking to wrap around this incident that may have happened to you and allow that then to sap your energy out of you? Because it's not healthy.
No, it's not. Obviously, you're going to give your point on it, but I would say is if you can process in your mind if it happens, and let's be honest, it happens a lot, and it's been happening a lot lately because of the nature of COVID. You know, a lot of people have lost their businesses or gone on furlough and then may have found out the company became insolvent and had to release people. So the first thing I think to say, it's not your fault. Don't try and take it as though you are to blame. I'm talking about the case of someone saying, right, we can no longer support your wage. You're basically going to be made redundant. And oftentimes, you may have some kind of inclination leading up to that, but it could come out the blue. And if it does, don't take it personal. And it's very difficult to say to somebody how you should react. And again, going back to that 3 times it happened to me, the first time, I wouldn't have listened to anybody. But I would say, try and see the humour in it. because I've come to realise now that rejection is actually protection. Sometimes the universe wants you to move on, get away from a toxic situation or from people you may not necessarily be getting on, but you wouldn't have admitted it. And when I talk about the humour, it's probably wrong to put it in here, but there are jokes about redundancy, and just start thinking about, how can I make fun of this? What was it? There was a guy, he was made redundant from his job at the greengrocers, and he was given 3 months' salary and 4 weeks in lieu of notice. Try and see the humour in it all, because life will throw curveballs at you, and it's probably better to see it as some kind of event that later on is going to make you a lot wiser and better, than rather seeing it as a and it's deliberate and it's personal.
Yeah, I think that's right, actually, mate. And the fact that it's not your fault. I mean, I guess if you're a total dickhead and you're made redundant, then that's one thing. Somebody who's relatively balanced and has been relatively successful in what they do, then it's not your fault. And I think one of the other things to note is that it mustn't define you as a human being, i.e. who you are or your value, because there is that sense of feeling like you've just been tossed out onto the scrap heap, and therefore, what do you toss out onto the scrap heap? Well, you toss rubbish onto the scrap heap, and I'm not sure that is a healthy way of looking at it either, because it doesn't define who you are. It certainly doesn't define you as an individual of value. Yeah. It opens up, I guess, opportunities for the future in a way which you would have been locked down beforehand, and you have now got that vista opening up in front of you. Yeah, I was chatting to my wife Ronnie about this yesterday, I think, and I was saying that it's a very discombobulating. That's my word. I'm liking that word today. It's a discombobulating feel to it all. Everything's very
discombobulated.
But I said, think of yourself as an animal that's been caged. So you've got this cage around you, and those parameters are very, very clearly defined. And then all of a sudden, you're airlifted, dropped into the middle of Tsavo National Park somewhere, and the cage's sides are just dropped, and you're like, oh my goodness, everything that has housed me, protected me, stuff that I've fought against, the boundaries that I've pushed against over the years, but now they've just suddenly been dropped. You almost feel a little bit naked and exposed. And let's face it, at this age, you don't want to be naked or exposed.
I don't know. There's all types that like certain things. You never know. You're right about the opportunity. I don't know if you remember the 90s. Suddenly the interest rate went up to 14%, and mortgages were almost impossible for some people to keep paying. So there was a lot of foreclosure on properties, and the first thing to go is advertising. So if you're in the advertising industry, as I was, and publishing, you're losing custom, and therefore there's going to be some kind of a consequence. The first time I was made redundant, I was lucky enough that I'd had experience that I could go out and get a job almost within 2 weeks. So the second time, I had money in pocket because I had the severance pay and I easily got a job, and I didn't pay attention to the lesson that I think the universe was trying to tell me. The second time, it was almost like, well, here we go again. And the third time, I thought, I've got to listen. And that's when I decided to go to university. Now, I'm talking in one sentence that took months of things to process, and life goes on and other difficulties, and I decided to relocate from London back down to Devon. All this was in the mix, and of course 2 young children and all that. But looking back, I can see it was an opportunity for me to go and do something I always wanted to do, which was to go to university and ended up being a teacher. So I would say, if you are going to take the opportunity or see the opportunity, decide, well, what do I want to do? What have I always wanted to do? What gives me energy when I wake up in the morning? What would I like to do that before I get to 80? I mean, because when you're on your deathbed and you're 80 years old, or older, hopefully, Steve, and you're still compos mentis, you're not going to be laying there thinking, if only I spent 1 more hour at work. You'll be thinking, was I a good father? Was I a good husband? Was I a good brother, a good friend? And did I go and do what I wanted to do? Even if it failed, if I had to go and it didn't fulfill itself, at least I tried. And I think that applies to everyone who's been made redundant. With the caveat, and I know I'm talking long here, sorry, with the caveat that yes, a lot of people, because of age and location, might find it difficult to go and get a job. So create your own. Become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I've always been a bit of a Del boy. This time next year, Rodney.
He did become a millionaire.
He did indeed.
It took him a few more years than he thought, but he did become a millionaire.
He definitely got to it. No, I think that's right, mate. I think that you do have to take stock of all of the situation. I mean, it took 3 slaps for you to actually wake up and smell the roses, as it were, to actually put into place perhaps some of the things that you should have or could have put in place first time round. So this is very much a case of, right, I've got to look on this as an opportunity for the future. What that opportunity brings and how that manifests itself, I really don't know. One of the other things that I've decided to do is I've given myself a little bit of breathing space, because it would be too easy to just chuck yourself back out into the job market and to just apply for this and apply for that and apply for the other. And I've thought about that. And while there have been some opportunities that I've seen come up and I thought, oh, that would be quite an interesting thing to have a crack at, I've given myself the liberty, as it were, to just hold fire until after Christmas and the New Year. And the idea being is that just gives me the opportunity to settle myself, to settle my mental, emotional state, and to hopefully in that next 5 or 6 weeks to be able to explore other ideas, really, in talking to people, chatting to yourself and others. It would just be, well, I wonder if I could have a little stab at that, or I wonder if I could do that. So I've given myself that sort of liberty, which it feels very self-indulgent, because I've never stopped.
It's not self-indulgent. If you think about it, we live in a culture that, certainly as ourselves being brought up and being in the Navy, you're expected by other people around you, and especially older generations, that you've got to work 40 hours a week and you've got to come home knackered and you've got to basically be paying a mortgage. Otherwise, you're nobody. But I don't think the universe wants us to live that life. That's just a slavish life. And sometimes we need to have experienced it so that when these opportunities come along, we think, well, okay, how do I want my life to go forward? Do I want to work for somebody else, or do I want to work for myself? Okay, working for someone else may give you energy and it may be a perfect mix. But I am convinced that currently, speaking to people in business who are all saying the same things in different businesses, where is everyone? They can't get staff. They were there before COVID, but they don't seem to have wanted to come back. And I'm convinced half of them are thinking, right, I don't want to go back and work for somebody else. I want to work for me. And perhaps there's been a new entrepreneurial spirit that's been unleashed. Perhaps there's a lot of people out there setting up their own little businesses. It's not indulgent to take time to think, well, where do I want to go? What's my skill set? And sometimes you need a bit of time just to recover, to catch your breath and clear the brain fog. Because I do know that when I left teaching, and I was writing books, I needed about 2 or 3 months to do that. So it's not indulgent. I think it's actually very important because, if nothing else, it's for your mental health.
Yeah, and I do think that you do have to cut yourself that bit of slack. It does seem self-indulgent. I agree with you. I think that it shouldn't be that way. But we are the product of our upbringing and our background in many respects. And as you said, everything that was drilled into me and likely into you when you were a young fella as well was you go out, you get yourself a job, you work hard and you work hard and you work hard and you work hard and you don't stop working and you keep working. I mean, my flipping dad's nearly 85 and he's still working, and he's not going to stop working, and he's going to keep working until he can't move, basically. And that's what he does. And so I've seen that type of work ethic. And, even while my wife's been away for the last 4 weeks, I've ripped the kitchen out and redone the bathroom, and everything has been from 5 a.m. till midnight every day for the last 4 weeks. Got to work, got to work, got to work, got to drive, got to drive, got to drive. While I see those things as commendable in other people and would say, yes, that's very good, I would also caution them. And I wouldn't take my own advice. I'd also caution them, and I would say, yes, that's very good, but you need to give time for yourself, and you need to take time out, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. But when I look at myself in the mirror, I just go, no, you've got to work. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. Don't stop, don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. Yeah. So it has been a little bit odd not having to get up in the morning at a particular time, not having to be in a particular meeting at a particular time, not having to have 30, 40 people phoning me up all through the course of the day saying, boss, what can I do with this and what do I need to do with that? And to just think, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do today? How am I going to do it? Yeah, so it's left me feeling a little bit self-indulgent with time, and maybe I shouldn't do that. And it's also given me a challenge of, well, how do I build disciplines in when those cage doors and walls are now all dropped? I still feel that there need to be parameters that you work to, whether that's just to keep you on the right track, or whether that's to just ensure that you just don't become some big fat blobby jelly and just ooze out of everything. Do you know what I mean? You need some sort of shape. A jelly gets put into its mold, doesn't it? And it's got a shape, even if it's a bit squidgy. Yeah. It's got a shape. So I think I still need to make sure I've got shape.
The interesting thing about shape, and you're talking about the mental aspect of shape as well as the physical, a lot of people who are made redundant and don't know what to do have this, I find, well, I did, have this sense of grievance. You know the Beatles song, Carry That Weight? Buddhists have this idea that you can literally get fat through anger. You can put on bodily weight. You're carrying physical weight, literally, mental weight. So the best thing to do is to get rid of that. And it starts with forgiveness. You have to forgive them and you have to forgive yourself. You know, you haven't failed because you may have lost your job. What helped me, and I didn't know at the time, I couldn't have given it the language, but now, having studied at university philosophy and ethics and other, world views, the best way for me to cope with it was what the Taoists call the empty vessel, tabula rasa in Latin. What is it? If you think of a potter making a vessel and beautiful glaze and a beautiful firing and it looks superb and it'll cost about $200 or $300 or whatever, you might think the value is in the clay, but it's not. The value is in the empty space inside. That's what we use. It's like a house. You can have all the most expensive, material to build a house, but what is really the most valuable part is the empty rooms. It's the emptiness. And it's the same with us. What really gives value to ourselves is not reacting negatively, but thinking, okay, what's the positive way forward? I now need time off to recuperate. I need time to think. And I'm going to forgive myself and forgive others and move forward positively, because if you put up energetic blocks saying, oh, I hate everyone, I hate the world, you'll basically miss those opportunities because you won't see them. You'll be focused on a dark path rather than going forward with a better peace of mind. So that's what I would recommend, that it's not indulgent to take time off. You may not know where the shape is of your life at the moment going forward, but eventually it will. But you want to start off on a fresh, clean path rather than the dirty one, if you know what I mean. I don't know if that makes sense.
Makes sense. No, I quite like the imagery around the value being in the emptiness of the vessel or of the building. I think that's good. I like that. I can use that.
And then get off the couch and do something positive. Could just be going for a walk.
You mean I've got to get off the couch? You mean I can't sit there with my 6-pack and my potato chips and Netflix on constant churn? I've got to actually do something.
You do. And I actually did that for too long. Writing a book, you'd become a hermit. The other thing I'm going to throw to you now is, if you was to pass on tips to somebody else who may face redundancy or something similar, what would you say a person should do? How should they approach it?
And again, I think that's going to be really different for the individual, and it's going to be different for the circumstances that they find themselves in. So I'm not sure that one size fits all, and I think that you need to tailor your approach to certain things. So as I've been processing mine, I thought of this as a mourning period. It was almost like a period of loss, a period of grieving. But when I've looked at what those, the 5 stages of mourning are, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, I'm not sure that I hit all of those areas. Because in terms of denial, there's no denial in me regarding what happened. There was anger. I can touch into anger. Bargaining, no, that doesn't really touch me. Depression, I can understand the depression side of it. And acceptance, well, that's what we're working towards. But I guess for me, the biggest thing was how to deal with loss, how to deal with that feeling of loss, and to give yourself the liberty to go, actually, I feel a bit lost, and to be willing to sit there with that feeling of loss. It's almost like it drops into your hand like clay, and you've got this big lump of loss, that's clay loss, that's dropped into your hand. Rather than just chuck it, hold it, feel it, feel the texture of it, and then start to work it, start to manipulate it. To be willing to accept whatever that emotion is that hits you, and to be willing to embrace it, and to hold it, and to look at it, and to reflect on it. And also, there's normally someone or something that you could link the issue to, i.e., I had a crap boss, or I had a crap company that I worked for, or something like that. And you sort of push that on to them, and they then become a target of anger.
I didn't want the job anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things that I think is really unhelpful is that, because once you're gone, people don't care about you anyway. So they just don't care. And so don't allow them to continually fuel your thinking when they've probably forgotten what your name is now. So don't allow more time for those people to get into your head when they're not going to be worried about you. So stop worrying about them. And again, this is a discipline, because I think that it won't happen immediately, and you have to keep practicing it, and you have to keep doing it. I think you just got to be really consistent. So be willing to accept that you're going to have good days and bad days. Grab those, whatever those emotions are, and really look at them and feel them, and understand what they feel like. Don't throw stuff back at people, because that's not helpful to you. It robs you basically of your peace. It's like wanting somebody else to die while you drink the poison, and that's just no good to anybody. So don't do that. Try and accept the whole thing as an experience and what you can draw from it. That's what I'm working through.
Very good. You reminded me of a story. It's an old Buddhist story that was put into Star Wars kind of context, where it was a master and a Padawan, and it goes along the lines of they were wandering around, and of course, taking the oath of the Jedi, they're not allowed to touch the opposite sex. It's forbidden for them. But they come to a swollen river where there's a woman who can't get across, and she's got food, and her family's going to get hungry, and she doesn't know what's happened to the children. So the master says, right, get up onto my back, and carries her across. Well, the Padawan is shocked, because the master has allowed a woman to get on top of him. And at the other side, the master puts down the woman, she says thank you, gives them some fruit, and goes off. And all day, the Padawan, the little acolyte, the little novice, doesn't know what to say. And they sat down at dinner, and he said, Master, can I say something to you? And he said, yeah, what's troubling you? And he said, well, you allowed this woman to touch you. Doesn't that go against our oath? And he said, look, I did the charitable thing. I carried her across, and I put her down. I was no longer carrying her. But you, young one, you're still carrying her. In other words, you can let this thing rest on your shoulders for a long time, and it doesn't get you anywhere. And it also stops you processing more positive thoughts about, I'm not going to be non-judgmental, I'm going to be positive and as encouraging to myself as possible, and go out there and make something of this opportunity. So it's very similar to what you just said.
See, I always knew I was a Buddhist. Or a Jedi. I'm not sure. I've definitely always known I was a Jedi. I've always been a Jedi.
That's right. Well, I've always looked like Yoda. I think the key as well is to think, I'm better than what has happened to me. I know I'm better, and I know I'm here to achieve something in life, and I'm going to do it. So as far as redundancy is concerned, I would say just approach it that way.
Sage advice, Master Yoda. Jedi you will be.
See through you, we do.
Well, mate, thanks for the conversation around that. Anyway, it's been really interesting, and it's good to just sort of share some of those thoughts and the way that individuals can process these things. Certainly the way that I've been trying to, and the way that you've expressed your approach to these things. It doesn't define you, doesn't indicate your value or lack of value, and that's really, really important. So just if anybody that does happen to listen to this find themselves in the same position, don't fall into that trap, because it doesn't define who you are, and it certainly doesn't define your value as a human being.
Follow the words of Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush. Don't give up.
That's it. That's exactly it.
Cheers, mate. I'll speak to you next time.
You take care. Catch you later.